Hi, I'm Lara, this is Osceola, and today I will be doing my reading wrap-up for the year 2021. So for the 5th year in a row, I had the goal of reading 25 books, and for the 5th year in a row, I failed that goal. I know, impressive. You all are astounded at my amazing reading ability. However, I will say I actually think I did fairly well reading. I was pretty consistent at the beginning and the end of the year, and then in the middle of the year, I moved 4 times and got a new job. So the fact that I didn't necessarily read as much as I wanted doesn't bum me out as much because I have started to create a reading habit, especially since the end of the year, and I am happy to continue it and hope I will actually be reading the amount of books I want to this year and reading more consistently, because hopefully I won't end up moving 4 times, though I am doing an internship, which is temporary, so I probably will end up getting a new job at some point, so wish me luck. Due to reading consistently, at least in December, I ended up reading 16 books, which is the second most books I've ever read in a year since joining Goodreads. Definitely not in my life though, but once I joined Goodreads, I actually started reading less. And I'm pretty sure it's actually the most amount of words I've ever read in a year since joining Goodreads. Since the 1 year I did read more books, a lot of the books I did read were episodic. Also, I genuinely enjoyed most of the books I read this year, which is the best part. So first, let's check out my year on Goodreads. Last year, I read 3,390 pages and 16 books. The shortest was The Slayman at 18 pages, and the longest was A Sky Beyond the Storm at 516. The average amount of pages I read per book was 211. Fahrenheit 451 was the most popular book I read, and The Slayman was the least known. The average rating I gave for a book last year was 3.9 stars, and the highest rated one was Starlight. My first review of the year was A Sky Beyond the Storm, which I really enjoyed. And then the first book I read was also A Sky Beyond the Storm, then Cinder, Guns and Smoke, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Fahrenheit 451, Breach of Peace, Little Moments of Love, Pinkalicious Fairy Garden, Brave New World, The Ivies, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, Little Bird, Starlight, The Slayman, and The Night Before Christmas was the last book I read and the last I reviewed, though I didn't review it this past year, and I read 16 books in total. I will say, though, disappointingly, of the 16 books I read this year, I only ended up reviewing 4 of them. I am willing to review the ones I didn't on this channel, so let me know if there are any you would like an in-depth review for. Also, the books I have reviewed, whether it's on Goodreads or YouTube or both, I will be linking these reviews down below and on any other part of the video I can. But since you know the books I read and the order in which I read them, I'm now going to be ranking the books from best to worst. However, I would like to start with 3 books that I will not be ranking. The first book I won't be ranking was actually the 3rd book I read this year, and that is Guns and Smoke by Lauren Severe and Abby Smith. The reason for this is I beta read an unfinished copy of this book. Now, normally I wouldn't mark that as a book I completed, but once I finished it, they said I could do that, and they even said I could rate it and review it based on the copy I read, which leads me to believe they didn't change much after I initially read it. However, I still do not feel comfortable rating and reviewing an unfinished book, since I don't know if things that helped the book for me or hurt the book for me are still in it or got changed. I assume most of the things were not changed since they seemed to publish it pretty soon after the round of beta reading. I think it was the last one, just to get small things to change, but still I am very specific in my reviews, so I am choosing not to add this in to a ranking category. However, I did read it, and it's a Western dystopian romance genre mashup, which I think is so cool. So if you're interested in that, I definitely recommend you check it out, and I will link the book trailer to this video if you want some more details about what it's about. The second book I won't be ranking is Pinkalicious Fairy Home, because I originally read it as research for a project I was working on, but I ended up deciding not to pursue that project anymore. However, I did read it and I did overanalyze it. I know it's a picture book, so I feel like it's kind of cheating, but I did read it, so I'm putting it here because I'm one of those people, I don't give a crap. If I've read it, I'll read it. But it is the only picture book I read, so I promise this whole video isn't cheating. And then no wait, there is another picture book I read. That's the third one. And that is The Night Before Christmas. So it is a family tradition for my parents, me, and my sisters to all sit down and read The Night Before Christmas every Christmas Eve. And I like to put it on Goodreads as a nice little reminder. So I included it on my Goodreads list because I like to have that little memento on there. However, I won't be ranking it because I enjoy it. And if I rank it every year, it's just going to end up near the top of the list every year and bump everything down lower, which I don't think is fair to the other books, so I will not be ranking it. Now, let's get into the actual list ranking, starting with my least favorite book of the year. At number 13 was Cinder by Marissa Meyer, which was also the only book I gave 1 star. So yeah. Cinder has so many things I should have loved. It has Cinderella, sci-fi, dystopian, fantasy, all mashed together in a genre mashup, which is also something that I love. The book started off as gritty and dark with a cool cyborg perspective, but it quickly devolved into a bland romance. And an equally bland special snowflake protagonist who lacked any personality. So yeah, wasn't my favorite. Sorry to disappoint you, Cinder fans, but it's not for me, and I don't plan on continuing the series after that. The climax of the book was fun and exciting in a silly, campy way, but it's not enough to turn the book around for me, and even that fun ending wasn't to the level of how much I enjoyed the more gritty beginning. And it definitely wasn't enough to make up for the bland middle. Anyway, if you want to see my full review where I ripped apart all my issues with the book, I recommend you check out my YouTube video because this is one of the few books I did actually review on my channel because people love a rant. So if you would like to see my in-depth issues I have with the book, I will be linking that video everywhere. Next book. Number 12, my second least favorite book of the year was Little Birds by Hannah Lee Kidder, which I gave 2 stars. This collection is described as featuring stories that explore the darkest corners of our lives. But to me, the collection was mostly just melancholy stories about characters who can't let go of the past. But there is also a trend of breakup stories, which personally I want to describe as one of the darkest corners of our lives. And I just found the stories to be very bland and kind of samey. And a lot of the short stories to me felt more like a couple scenes taken from a novel as opposed to a completed story. I think overall the individual stories were proficient. However, the curation of the collection was lacking and the stories were too similar to allow any of the individual stories to stand out. If I had read some of these short stories in a magazine with a variety of authors' stories, they might have stood out more to me. However, even then, I still probably wouldn't have found any of these to be my new favorites, but I definitely think the whole of the collection was my biggest issue. Okay, I need to stop. I plan on posting a full review for this collection soon. So when that's up, I will link it. And since it isn't yet, maybe just subscribe to the channel in case you want to see my full critiques of this collection. Number 11, my first 3-star book of the year was The Ivies by Alexa Dawn. So I actually received this copy for free to review. It's an ARC copy, I believe, but also one thing that I would like to add is I didn't actually read the physical book. I read an ebook because this didn't come in time for my video. So this is the first time this physical book is actually being held up for a video. But yeah, I finally got it. So since I received an ARC copy to review, I have a video and a Goodreads review, both of this book, so I will link them both everywhere. The video one is very in-depth. So this YA murder mystery had Great atmosphere, and I really enjoyed that the most. I thought it was well done. A flawed protagonist who's very frustrating at the beginning, but eventually does get called out for her crap. And a mean girl in a book who might be one of my favorite mean girls I've ever read. Not watched, but read, because I think she had more depth to her than most. It was Avery. I'm just going to say her name. That's not a spoiler. I liked Avery's character. And also, this book featured tons of cool twists that genuinely got me. However, the negatives of this book is, despite most of the twists being cool, the final twist of the killer was awful. I didn't like it. So the problem is, any killer would have been fine. It wasn't that who the killer was. It was the motivation of the killer was literally the worst motivation I've ever seen for a murder mystery. It was just not believable. It was just stupid. And then I also found this book to be overflowing with the author's unsolicited political opinions, which in a YA murder mystery took away from the feeling of suspense because I was constantly stopping to be lectured by the author. I also found that most of the side characters were lacking. I think only really the protagonist, Avery, and one other side character had any depth, which really prevents the murder mystery from being engaging, because to have a good murder mystery, you need a lot of potential suspects. And really, there was only 2 interesting ones because we know the protagonist didn't do it. So yeah, even though I think the atmosphere of this book is good and it pulls off a lot of twists, I think that I am constantly taken out of the atmosphere and the feeling of suspense due to the insert of politics. And I'm also not one of those people who say you can't put politics in the book. I just don't think this book did it well. And also, the book, just the ending was a real letdown. But yeah, I did give it 3 stars because I think it's about average and it does have about the same amount of good and bad. But yeah, if you want to see my more in-depth thoughts though, check out my review. Number 10, The Sleigh Man, which is a short fiction horror story by Cassie Daly, which I gave 3 stars. So I will say that I feel like this also is a bit of a cheat because it's one short story. However, this is the only one in this video that is on its own. Actually, no, there was a novella too. But I read it because one of my friends, the Year of the Author, did a video reviewing it, and I thought this seemed cool, and it was Christmas Eve. I was like, you know what? I want to read this because it's now or never. This is when it's timely to read. This story is unique and imaginative, featuring a threat I have unlike anything I've ever read before, and it's about a mother and her daughter. The mother's recently been widowed, and the daughter's been talking to a mysterious man that she calls the Sleigh Man. So, pretty interesting. I thought overall it was really cool and imaginative, and that was my favorite part. However, I personally found that it didn't necessarily shock me. That could have been due to the fact I watched a review for it beforehand, which was relatively spoilery. However, overall, I just didn't necessarily find it to be my favorite thing. It was kind of just average to me. But if you do enjoy horror, I think you should check it out. And I think the blinder, the better, just because I feel like with short stories, there's not really much you can discuss about it without spoiling it. The next book that I am ranking at number 9 is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I gave 4 stars, which is funny because I'm pretty sure that I ranked it lower on the list than another book I gave 3 stars. However, the reason for that is that though I don't think this book is particularly flawed, it doesn't necessarily have as much of an emotional impact or my personal appeal to me. So while I gave the book 4 stars because I think it is worthy of 4 stars, it isn't necessarily my next favorite book. And the reason for that is I think this book, it's funny, it did make me laugh at times, it's so imaginative and quirky, and I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the aspects of science because it genuinely was interested in the scientific aspects. I would describe this book's genre as absurdist science fiction. And though I think it does it very well, it does exactly what it wants to do extremely well and competently, I think that personally, when I read a book, I love when a book evokes multiple different emotions from me. And this one only really evoked humor and interest, which I want a book to make me feel more things. Also, though, one thing I did find a bit lackluster was the characters. The book took everything so unseriously that I wasn't ever really able to empathize with the characters or feel anything more for them than interest at who they were. So it resulted in a book that I think was well done, and I don't have any objective criticisms of because it does exactly what it wants to. But the experience of reading it, I felt relatively detached from the story, which is not what I personally want from a book. I may continue the series later on, but I don't necessarily feel extremely motivated to do it right away. Next book is number 8, and that is Breach of Peace by Daniel Green. So I actually rated this novella lower than the last book I reviewed at 3 stars. However, despite this book, I feel like being more flawed, it appealed to my personal taste more, which is why I ranked it higher. The more serious tone of the story does appeal to my taste a bit better, and also it's like a mashup of 1984 and the Lovecraftian video game, The Sinking City, when it comes to the atmosphere, and I love that. I loved the atmosphere of this story. I thought the world was so compelling, and I am very motivated to pick up the next book, which I didn't realize was out until recently, so I'm definitely going to be reading that soon and hopefully reviewing it. And I did actually give this short novella a in-depth review, which I will be linking everywhere if you want to check it out. But overall, I thought the atmosphere of this story was extremely well done. I enjoyed the protagonist Clid's unique perspective and point of view, and I just think the prose could be made better. I think the descriptions of the gore and the world and the body horror was very well done. However, I do think when it comes to characters and their personalities, I was told things a lot more than shown, which is a bit of an issue. And also there's a part where a character got a perspective for like 2 paragraphs and then never again, which I think exemplifies this book's failure to show the depth of the characters and need to just tell me everything. Also, the foreshadowing of this short story was way too on the nose and kind of it negatively affected the reading experience. I felt like I was being spoiled by the own novella, and it didn't create a sense of dramatic irony. It was just like, well, that kind of gives everything away. I don't think it was necessarily done well. However, overall, I loved the world. I thought the beginning and the end of the story was very well done. I am excited to read more about this civilization that has been created because the vibes of it, I'm all for. I'm all for that Lovecraftian 1984 world. Give me more. Number 7 is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, which I gave 4 stars. However, I will admit I'm not super confident in my rating, and that was one of the books that I listened to, and I think I need to go back and actually visually read it to better solidify my opinion of it. And then once I do hope to actually give a more in-depth review. Now, I personally love dystopians, and I think this book creates a genuinely interesting dystopian world. And some of the things are crazy accurate to real life. The most sci-fi element of the story is that there are robot dogs that will hunt down people. And you know what just was happening in Hawaii? They created robot dogs to scan homeless people for COVID. And I'm like, why is the robot dogs of all things accurate to real life? Like, what the heck? That's just crazy to me. But besides that, I found the protagonist to be a bit lacking and less complex than most dystopian protagonists, especially when it comes to the classics. Because the story starts with him already kind of realizing the error of his ways, because his backstory and who he is a fireman, someone who burns the books for the society. And I think it was a really big missed opportunity that the book kind of started after he had already kind of realized his wrongs instead of actually showing us how he changes. And I felt that was a big missed opportunity. And I also felt that some of the characters were a bit more flat than other dystopians. Not all of them, but I just didn't get that same depth that I usually love in dystopian books. I think I want to reread it though, because I do think there is depth. I don't want to crap on this book and make you think that all the characters are flat, because that's not the case. But there were missed opportunities, in my opinion. And I think part of it might be that the book is just so short and it takes place in such a short period of time that it's not able to explore as much as most other dystopians. However, I think that a little bit more time and depth would have benefited the story. Number 6 is Starlight by Hannah Lee Kidder, which I also gave 4 stars. So this is funny because I gave her other collection 2 stars, which I was not a big fan of. However, I decided to give this collection a chance because this one was described as having some dark fantasy and horror elements to it. So I knew it wouldn't just be contemporary, which led me to believe it might be more interesting. And luckily, I was right. I really enjoyed this collection. My favorite story was Mangrove. I really enjoyed Mangrove's story. But at first I wasn't feeling the collection, but then when the Swamp Witch story came about, it changed everything. So again, Mangrove favorite story is about these 2 sisters who are putting on fake seances where one's like the person talking to ghosts and the other one's pretending to be a ghost. And they're doing it to make money to escape their abusive mother. And that's such a cool concept and it's so well done and I love it. And I think that creativity is really shining in this collection. It really is on display. And I did find this collection did have some repeated themes about characters being in abusive relationships. However, I do think these relationships and this abuse in how it is depicted to the reader and how the characters handle it was unique enough, but every story was still interesting in its own right. And I really enjoyed this collection. And as someone who's wanting to read more short stories, I'm really glad I read this collection. Number 5 was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And I gave this book 4 stars. However, I will say the first act of this book was 5 stars for me. And I also loved the ending. I just felt at times that the setting, locations, and the backdrop of this immortal character was underutilized, and I also found, again, the middle to be repetitive with what was happening throughout history. However, overall, as a character study, I love the protagonist. I really love the secondary protagonist too, and however, this is more of a character study and has a lot of themes about art and how it lasts and inspires others. And from that perspective, I thought those aspects were really well done. And again, I really liked the end. And I actually originally read this as an audiobook, but requested a physical copy for Christmas, which I was luckily gifted by my lovely family. And I'm excited to reread it because the writing in the story was very poetic and beautiful when I read it or listened to it. And I found the writing so beautiful that I want to actually reread it visually and learn more deeply from it because I just enjoyed it so much. So obviously, if I want to reread the book, then I obviously really enjoyed it. Number 4, the first 5-star book on my list is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. So I want to say that I find some books hard to listen to in audiobook form, specifically epic fantasy and sci-fi, where there's lots of characters and lots of moving parts. However, Murder on the Orient Express is perfect for an audiobook format because it's majoritively the detective interviewing other murder suspects, and I think that really makes this a great book to listen to. And if you're trying to find an audiobook that can help when you're not someone who can always listen to every book in audio form, you can't keep track of them all, this one I think was very listener friendly. But yeah, overall, I really love this. I want to read all of her Hercule Poirot series about this specific detective who I think his name's pronounced Poirot. It's been a while since I've listened to it, but I should know how to pronounce it because I did listen to it, but I still can't because French. But overall, I really enjoyed this mystery. And even though I actually knew who the killer was, one of the other twists at the end of the story about one of the characters still really shocked me, and I loved how it was done. The characters were really thought out and well written, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the story. My only negative critique critique though is I found that there were some hints and clues for the mystery that you aren't told about until after the detective, or when the detective is giving his monologue on how he saw this clue and helped him figure out who was lying about what. And to me, I found that to be a bit disappointing because I love it when in a mystery you can follow along the whole time. So yeah, that is one critique I have of it. I wish that I had been given the clues as the detective saw them, or at least had been given them enough that I could hopefully notice them if I was really astute and figure out what the lies and different things were. But in reality, it's not necessarily a mystery that you can figure out everything yourself because some of the stuff isn't given to you until it's already being told to you. Still, I love this mystery and definitely plan on continuing the series. Then at number 3, my third most favorite book, which I gave 5 stars, is Little Moments of Love, a Katana Comics collection. So this is a cute little wholesome collection of a boyfriend and girlfriend, just cute little moments between them. It's just so wholesome and sweet and precious, and I really enjoyed it. It's definitely a cute thing I can just pick up, and it's a nice little like, oh, this puts me in a happy mood. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. There's really nothing wrong with this collection, so I have no critiques. It's just adorable and precious. Number 2, also with 5 stars, is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. So I originally listened to this book. However, I got a used physical copy, which is why it's covered in stains and stuff. But, you know, gotta save money, so I'm getting a used copy. I'm not buying a new one. And I am genuinely interested in rereading it. I thought the world was so strange and unique, but well thought out, and I enjoyed some of the themes of it. Now, I originally, when it comes to dystopians, I always was like, 1984, that ending is brutal, with everything in the last line is just so well done. And this book gives 1984 a run for its money, because the ending of this story is like, oh my gosh, that is just so brutal and dark, but that's what I want in a dystopian novel. So yes, I really enjoyed this. I like the themes, I like the character exploration. They're all flawed and interesting characters, and I definitely plan on rereading this. And also, apparently there's a book called Brave New World Revisited, where the author actually has essays discussing his novel that he wrote. So it's not the novel, it's essays about it. And I also want to pick that up too, because I enjoyed this so much. So I definitely want to reread this, and when I do, I plan on reviewing it. I didn't review it when I listened to the audiobook, but that's fine. I'm sure my review would be better if I did it based on actual reading it with my eyes, because I know some people can listen to audiobooks and give great reviews. I'm not hating on that, but me personally, I need to actually read it. And number 1, my favorite book of the year, was also the first book I read this year, and that is A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. So this is the final book in the An Ember in the Ashes quartet, which here are the other books here. And I actually gave this book 4 stars because it's funny, because I rated it as my favorite, even though I've had multiple 5-star books. And the thing is, this book has enough flaws that I feel like giving it 5 stars isn't accurate rating. There are things I wish it did better. But I enjoyed this series so much and loved this send-off to this series so much that it still is my favorite. This is one of my 2 favorite YA fantasy series I've ever read, and I haven't completed the other one. But I just absolutely adored it. I love the themes of this story and the message and the send-off for the characters. It's just really enjoyable, and I definitely plan on rereading this series in the future, not to give a more in-depth review or to analyze it again, just for the sheer fun of it. So I actually did film a review for this book, but I never posted it. However, I feel like I probably will post it, even though I don't think it'll be a well-watched one. However, I will say in that review, I will discuss some of the issues I have with it, and I also want to discuss some of the issues in a trope talk I did, because there's a negative thing about this book that I actually think the 3rd book pulled off better. However, despite that, I love this series. I think this is a well-written send-off that does it justice. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, even if it's not perfect, because I don't think a book needs to be perfect for you to love it. And I don't necessarily think more perfect always means more enjoyable. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the 16 books I read last year, and I have some to hold up. I read a mixture of physical books, ebooks, and audiobooks. I would say mostly ebooks and audiobooks. A lot of the physical books I actually have with the intention of rereading these books, but that's a good sign that I liked it enough to go get my own copy. This was one of the ones I actually did have a physical book for, though, which was nice. Anyway, what were your thoughts on the books that I've read? Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree? What was your favorite and least favorite books of the year? Please let me know all your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.